Hi, and welcome to Q&A Wednesday. For some odd reason, it just seems to come faster and faster every week. But I just want to say greetings from California. I am actually down here visiting my son, and I've sent everybody away, so it's nice and quiet in the house. They're actually out shopping, but rock on. They can go shopping, and we're preparing to go to Universal Studios tomorrow. So fun. Anyway, I have a really important topic to talk about tonight. It's something that I've had multiple people ask me about, and it's something that I could really talk for a long time about and get really deep, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to really keep it super simple so that people understand what insulin is. And I apologize. I'm hearing kind of an echo in the background. I probably should have prepared for that by, doing some sound things. And you probably hear there's a fish tank in the background as well. But I'm literally trying to utilize the lighting that is in the house right now because, of course, it's been gorgeous out today. Super happy to enjoy the weather. Not going to lie, it's like in the upper 60s, lower 70s. And so I'm happy as a clam. Anyhow, so a couple of fun things before we get to talking about the topic tonight. Some pretty fun stuff coming out. First of all, no Meals with Melissa this Saturday, just because I don't know what we're going to be doing. And it was really, I really want to enjoy my time with my son and his wife. So I'm going to hang out down here. My girls are with me as well. So we're just having a good time. Be home in time for Easter. So other fun, exciting things. Have an ebook coming out. Yeah, you're gonna love the title. It's actually called 1200 Calorie Diets and Other BS. Not really BS, but anyway, so that's going to be coming out here in the next couple of weeks. Also looking at a new podcast coming out. It's going to be pretty awesome. Hey, Donald. Pretty excited. It's going to kind of take more of the, life as we know it kind of approach. But, for those of you that have tried to work with any sort of, becoming healthier, health goals, that a lot of it is right here, right? That you have to accomplish. You got to fix your head before you fix your body. So we're kind of approaching that. Also, something super exciting. For those of you that live anywhere local to me, we are going to be doing a summer bod challenge. So, if you're kind of at a position where you realize that the holidays probably got the best of you this year, you're not quite jumping into spring as much as you would hoped you had when it comes to preparing for that bikini body. You might want to touch bases with me and see what's going on for that, because that's going to be super exciting, something exciting coming up. Anyhow, so today we are, like I said, we're going to totally simplify what insulin does for you. I find it fascinating that most people don't even understand. You've heard, insulin spikes, or that, it creates body fat, which is true, but you don't really know how. And so without getting too detailed into, get bogged down with some of the scientific information, I'm going to kind of give you more of a simplified version of it. What's important to you, how insulin plays a huge role in what you do. You can't live life without insulin. And if you do, for some, they're type 1 diabetic. Type 2 is actually created a lot by lifestyle. But type 1, obviously, that's not something that they did wrong. That's just their body just doesn't produce insulin, and so of course they need to utilize something that helps them break that down. But anyway, that's a whole other ballgame. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, so my goal for you honestly today is just to really take a good hard look at your nutrition and figuring out, for some of us, the downside to things like type 2 diabetes is that some of us have more of a genetic disposition to have issues with that. I know that it runs in my family. My grandmother had it. My mother is currently dealing with it. She's insulin taking, type 2 diabetic. And so when I chose to lead a healthier life, it was partially from watching the downsides of what my mother and my grandmother would deal with in working with what's the point? What's the point of what, Jeff? We're going to talk about why insulin is important. That's the point. So that's, kind of one of the reasons that I chose to be a healthier person. I know that taking insulin for the rest of my life is not something that I really want to deal with. And I really fully believe that type 2 diabetes is one of those diseases that can be fully preventable with diet and nutrition change. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. So let's talk about what insulin is. Insulin is the hormone that helps, it's made by the pancreas in response to an increase in blood sugar. And how do we get blood sugar? Well, it's when certain carbs hit our bloodstream. Now, for those of you that know A little bit more about carbohydrates. You know that there's carbohydrates that are a little bit better options, such as complex carbohydrates. Those are things that come from more plant-based carbohydrates, obviously vegetables, things like grains, potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, oats, and of course not instant. You know how I feel about that. Versus things that are more of a simple sugar, such as obviously refined sugar. You know, even things like honey and fruit can be a little bit of an issue if you're not careful, although because they have more nutrients and vitamins in them, they are a much better option. Anyone who has actually dealt with some sort of insulin issues or with diabetes knows that even within the healthier versions of like fruit and things like that, you still have to be careful with things like the glycemic index. You know, there are some fruits that tend to turn into sugar a little bit faster in your system, and some things, like I said, like complex carbs, that because of the fiber and the nutrients have a slower sugar release. Now, our body utilizes that sugar, that glucose, for energy. That's what it is. Carbohydrates are the one nutrient that our body uses for energy. Yes, I know that you can take other nutrients and turn them into energy, but in general, that's what our body uses carbohydrates for. We're not even going to get into keto and all that good stuff today. We're just talking about what insulin does for us. The problem with the way that our bodies are designed is that when we get too much sugar or glucose running through our blood, it can cause problems. Things like nerve damage. If you've heard it all about what type 2 diabetics go through, or diabetes in general, you know that they can actually lose limbs because of the nerve damage that can cause. So our bodies are designed in order when we eat something with carbs, our body takes that through insulin or spiking insulin, takes that blood glucose, takes the glucose from it, and shuttles it somewhere for storage, right? And what's supposed to happen, and I'm just, like I said, I've got some notes here because I want to make sure that I cover everything that I thought about, is for our normal insulin response, the glucose is actually, like I said, being taken into our body's cells to be used for energy. The problem being is that in this day and age, there's so much processed food and refined sugar and garbage out there that we pretty consistently bombard our bodies with high sugar foods, and our body has to then deal with it. And because it can actually be toxic. So in order to do that, it releases more and more insulin. When we eat things like a quick carb or a simple sugar, because it hits our system so quickly, the insulin has to spike, okay? That's what an insulin spike is. I know I had somebody last time ask me about that. That's the body's release of insulin in order to deal with the high levels of blood glucose, right? And of course, for anybody, if you've ever eaten things like anything that's high in sugar, like a candy bar or ice cream or baked goods or things that tend to hit your system really fast, it might give you some quick energy and you might feel really, really great for a short amount of time. And then, of course, then you hit that crash afterwards, that energy crash, where, all of a sudden then your body actually drops, your blood sugar drops, and that can actually create a whole new set of problems. The biggest issue comes when we consistently do that. We eat those things over and over and over again. So we have this situation where our body has to use insulin to shuttle that away. But then all of a sudden, then our blood glucose drops, and then we get that opposite reaction, the fogginess, the energy crash. So, over time, when our body does that pretty consistently over and over and over, that's where insulin resistance comes in. It's kind of like your body just gets tired of producing so much insulin because it can't keep up. It gets tired of dealing with that. So insulin resistance actually is where your cells fail to respond normally to insulin, right? So insulin takes that and then it delivers it into a storage unit. So for our body, the primary storage unit is what? Fat cells. So when we consistently give our body way too much carbohydrates, and especially in the form of simple sugars, our body has to do something with it, and the cells that are available are fat storage or fat cells, right? Dean, I'm not starting over, but you can post it when I'm done, and you can go back to the beginning and watch this all over again. Make sure that you do ask questions, though, guys, because I want to make sure I have a lot of information, but I do want to make sure that I cover everything so that you understand how it works. And like I said, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible so that it makes sense. just really quickly to back up for a second, we are going to talk more about insulin resistance, but what blood sugar is, our body does regulate, it's designed to regulate it very, very well. And of course, in the days of our ancestors, sugar wasn't something that they ate a whole lot of because it wasn't readily available. But our body has been designed to regulate it very, very well because it wants to have balance, or what we call homeostasis. So most of the time that blood glucose is stored in our skeletal muscle, which actually we're going to talk about again, that there is a benefit to insulin, but it's stored in our skeletal muscle and our liver. It's known as glycogen. Okay, and actually our brain consumes over 60% of our blood glucose in a normal, slightly sedentary person. And we do have to have some sort of a leveled out blood glucose because, again, if it gets too low, that causes a whole new set of problems. And our levels are lowest when we wake up in the morning because, of course, we haven't eaten all night. And then it raises after we eat meals for a little while. There's two situations, of course, where we have a problem, and that's hyperglycemia, where our levels are too high, and especially in type 2 diabetes, that's where it becomes consistently too high, or hypoglycemia, where we are too low, and of course that's the other issue. And type 2 diabetes is a persistent glycemia. It's the most prominent disease related to the failure of blood sugar regulation. So again, it really comes down to that insulin resistance is kind of a pre-diabetes situation where our cells just become really resistant to the insulin trying to do its job, which is to store that excess glucose. Anytime that you have an excessive amount of, is too much sugar cause cramps? I've never heard of too much sugar. Well, too much sugar cause cramps? I've never heard that one. Really usually there's, the symptoms of diabetes run a little bit differently. I'm trying to think if I've ever heard of that one. It's things like, let's talk about that another time. Let's back up for a second because we can do a whole nother hour on this at another time. Insulin resistance comes when our blood sugar, it leads to too high of blood sugar on a consistent basis, increased hunger. That sugar plays that huge role. It is an addicting substance. It does light up the same part of the brain as cocaine. So, there is an addicting factor. There are withdrawal symptoms. What's your take on, this is Mike, he's asking, what's our take on high GI carbs and fast digesting isolate protein powder post-workout? Actually, that's called nutrient timing, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute because there is a benefit to insulin. Most people just look at it as this bad thing that we're really trying hard not to spike our insulin because, of course, that means that it's taking that glucose, that sugar, and storing it as body fat, right? So people who consistently consume a lot of excess sugar have issues with obesity. That is the reason why we have such an epidemic in this country. Take a look at anything, guys. There's sugar. Did you know that there is sugar in iodized salt? There's dextrose, and it makes absolutely no sense. Well, I know why they do it, but it's just frustrating that something as simple as salt contains sugar, right? That makes no sense to me, common sense wise. But of course, they're just trying to make you consume more. Anyhow, so there is a benefit at some point, though, to insulin spikes, and that is right around a workout, predominantly a strength training workout where you are utilizing what is in your muscle stored nutrients known as glycogen, right? And you're using that up. So in order to start the recovery process quicker, if you can time the majority of your carbs, and actually it is your quick acting carbs, so more of a fast digesting carb into your system, it spikes your insulin, but instead of taking those nutrients and storing it as body fat, it actually shuttles it directly to your muscle in order to help with growth. Okay, so there is, insulin is actually an anabolic product. It is important for protein synthesis. So if you can, again, there's a lot more information on that. I have a really great book that really talks about that. And again, that's something that we can talk about another time. But insulin isn't all that bad in every fashion. But for the majority of America who, lives on pizza, full strength, sugar-filled soda pop, and junk food, we're all dealing with all these fat stores that insulin creates. So I can see where people look at it as solely an issue, a problem, something that we don't want, which in general, of course, is true. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to avoid that. But back to, for a second, to, let me finish talking a little bit about insulin and muscle. So, the benefit of timing your nutrients around your workouts. Also, it's very smart to have something that is a little more quick acting carb first thing in the morning when you wake, especially if you're trying to build muscle, predominantly because you have fasted while you slept for the night, and to try to keep your muscle from becoming catabolic, which means breaking down and utilizing it to try and rebuild itself. You actually should get a little bit of a quick acting carb in the morning. So I tend to eat things like oats, maybe even some like potatoes, Yukon Gold or red fingerling potatoes are great. We love cream of rice at my house, not gonna lie. I know it's baby food, but it is like the best food ever. So in the morning, those are great options to kind of stop that catabolic situation from going on with your muscle. And then also, of course, like I said, post-workout. And so there's more information on that. There's a certain amount of quick-acting carbs and, of course, protein mix that is the most effective. And I have a book on it. I don't have it with me, but I can actually post more information below. So let's jump back to insulin resistance. So really quickly, for those of you, like I said, if anybody's ever dealt with the glycemic index, if you've ever looked at it, now I actually, out of my 5 babies, I had 2 pregnancies where I had gestational diabetes, and it wasn't even in order, which I found fascinating, was actually like 2 and 4. But I learned a lot about the glycemic index because there are certain foods that turn to sugar faster in your system than others. Of course, anything that's a refined sugar is going to be a big issue. That's a super starchy product. Even certain vegetables and fruits can actually turn to sugar much quicker in your system. And then we have slower glycemic index products, and those are going to be things that are, like I said, more plant-based, oats, complex carbs in general. And the reason why they're slower is because the fiber content slows that down. Now, let me just throw in a word about net carbs. Yeah, you know what? I think people put way too much faith into how that works. I just say the cleaner that you eat, the better, especially when they talk about net carbs with a processed food. I call crap on that because a processed food breaks down in general much faster than something that is a clean, whole food, which of course is something that we've either grown or killed, right? So again, back to insulin resistance, it's your body's way of kind of getting tired of producing so much insulin to try and keep up with the bombardment of the simple sugars that you're putting in your system. Some people who, like I said, if you're gaining a lot of abdominal fat, fat around the midsection, that can come from way too many carbs, way too many simple sugars. You're going to have a lot more difficulty losing weight. Here's the problem. When you eat too many carbs on a consistent basis, your body has absolutely no reason to dip into your fat stores for fuel because it's getting what it needs from the carbs that you're ingesting, right? And when you consistently spike your insulin over and over and over again, when your insulin is present, it actually stops your body from burning fat stores. So you've got a problem on both ends because you're teaching your body it doesn't need to burn fat and it has to store all the excess sugar. And by spiking the insulin over and over and over again, it stops your body's ability to tap into the fat stores in order to use that as fuel. Now, again, I'm not a fan of things like keto because, again, now I feel like you're cutting out all carbs, and not all carbs are bad. Complex carbs have so many vitamins and minerals and nutrients in them that your body needs. I think we've become so obsessed with calories and what that does for our body. We forget that we eat for the nutrients. We eat for the vitamins. We need those products in order for our body to function correctly. And so now we've created all these huge issues with, autoimmune disease. And again, I'm not getting into it and I'm not blaming or pointing fingers at anybody, but I think that because of the American diet and our environment and the things that we deal with, that now our bodies don't function the way that they're supposed to. So our best option, obviously, is to give our bodies the nutrients that it needs and to be able to give it the best ability, the most healthy option possible, even within the toxicity of our environment. So things that can affect, whether or not our body deals efficiently with the excess blood glucose, the sugar in our system. Obviously genetics play a huge role in that. Again, I know that my family has a propensity for diabetes, so I'm obviously very aware of that, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I choose to eat very, very little refined sugar at this point. I've pretty much completely cut it out of my diet. Once in a while, I'll have something, because I'm not gonna lie, I have a sweet tooth. I love chocolate, but I find that once I start, I can't stop. So I'm very aware of what that can do, and so I really just try to stay away from it. Age, the older that we get, of course, the harder it is for our body to deal with some of those, because our processes don't work the same. Cultural variables, obviously, I know different backgrounds, different situations, systems work a little bit differently. And also the biggest one, of course, I fully believe, life choices. Obviously a sedentary lifestyle, your body just doesn't work as efficiently. If you can give it some exercise and eat well and get enough sleep, your body's going to deal so much better with it. For those with excess weight, again, I've been there, 210 pounds on a 5'3" frame, not super healthy, right? And of course, then my whole body had to work so much harder. Hence the reason that, of course, I had gestational diabetes twice. But for the firm reason why I just decided I was never going to get to that point. Lack of exercise, and of course the things that we're putting in our body nutritionally are going to make a huge difference. And there's also there are some medications that can actually make people more susceptible to having type 2 diabetes, but again, that's for another day. But just so you have that information. Okay, so let's talk about some tips in order to really kind of utilize insulin to your body's best, what it was designed for. Again, if you're eating, something here and there, hey, somebody had a birthday party, I ate part of a piece of cake, or, once in a while I have some ice cream, not a big deal. But because of the way that food in general has become so convenient and, of course, processed, most of us get way more than we really need to. Okay, Lynette says she's addicted to peanut butter. I'm not gonna lie, girl, I love peanut butter. And when I find that I am addicted to something, or that I really struggle to limit myself, I just cut it out. I have to, because I know that I can go a little overboard. Downside to peanut butter, although it tends to be a decent option of healthy fats, because fats, of course, contain more calories, that can become a problem real quick. Okay, so tips on how to better, keep your body running efficiently, how for it to most best use insulin. Number one, eat complex carbs. Again, I don't think that you should cut carbs out. Things like sweet potatoes right now are my favorite thing, not gonna lie. Sweet potatoes, and I get a little bit of oats in the morning with some banana, and I am a happy girl. It's seriously like eating candy. I know, it's kind of silly, right? The more that you eat clean, the better those things taste to your taste buds anyway. So not actually a bad option. But, the other benefit of those complex carbs is they have a much slower response. The sugar takes a little bit longer to hit the bloodstream, right? So they're a much better option. I have a girlfriend who is a type 1 diabetic, has been since I believe she was 14. And although she does not produce her own insulin and now she wears a pump, which I think has changed her life and is amazing. By the way, she is like the coolest person you would ever meet. But one of the things that I noticed working with her over the years is that when she did eat more complex style carbohydrates, that she didn't have these high highs and low lows when it came to blood sugar and working with her insulin intake. So even for a type 1 diabetic, the complex carbs are such a much better option than obviously eating a bunch of junk. Yeah, I know that I've known people, and they shall remain nameless, who actually take more insulin so that they can eat more junk. And that really bothers me, just to the effect that it doesn't cut out the negative response from the sugar or what that does to their system. They have to take the insulin to regulate themselves. And that's to me, that's not okay, especially when your body was designed to do that. And we've kind of created that by what we choose, our lifestyle, what we choose to do. So the more that you can avoid refined sugars, really processed foods, the nasty carbs. I've heard people say, hey, you can lose weight even eating, it's especially for people who are really into if it fits your macros. Again, I like if it fits your macros. I find that for most people, if you know what your formula is and you know what your goals are, it's really beneficial because you can pick and choose what you're going to eat for the day. But when you put refined sugars, things like ice cream and cookies and Pop-Tarts and garbage, alongside carbs, even higher sugared carbs, you know, quick sugar, things like apples and honey. I know it's more of a natural sugar, but it still does the same thing to your system. You know, there's just such a huge difference between a Pop-Tart and an apple. The quality of calories and the quality of those macros makes such a big difference. So really be careful with that. Eat protein, eat more protein, eat protein with every meal. You know, protein, I tell people, you know, even when you eat your fruits, oh, sorry, I've got some dogs in the background here. When you eat your fruits alongside a protein, the protein will actually slow down the absorption rate of the sugars of the fruit. So it makes it a much better option. You really should have more proteins, or have proteins at every meal. That will help. It's a thermogenic nutrient. So here comes my family. I even told them I was doing this, but they're all coming back. Eat good, healthy fats. That will help keep your satiation, which means that you'll feel fuller longer. Your body does get a certain amount of energy from those. So those are always a good option. Of course, things like get enough sleep, avoid stimulants, have some dogs in the background because that's always fun. And base most of your carbs around your workouts, because of course that's when your body needs it. Without the source of the carbs for energy, your body then has to take the proteins and the fats and turn them into energy source. And of course then it can't fuel the muscle. So and then also know the differences in your glycemic index and what foods actually hit your system much faster as sugar and which take a little bit longer. Those are some ways to really kind of avoid the insulin spikes, because that really is your goal, is to avoid huge spikes of insulin, because again, that's when your body has to take it and it will immediately think storage, and our body's storage unit is fat, right? So hopefully that gives you, that's, like I said, I was just trying to give you some basics on how insulin works, what insulin spikes are, insulin resistance, which is a huge buzzword at this point, and even things like metabolic disorders, which again is just a topic for a completely another day. But you guys, if you have questions, please, you know, I had a couple of questions which were great. Mike asked a really great one about the muscle, and which we were talking about anyway, and around, you know, spiking the insulin around your workouts. But I get my best ideas from you guys. So please make sure that you leave some messages below. Tell me what you'd like to hear about, and don't be afraid to share this with your friends. Hopefully we can educate everybody to at least be making some good choices when it comes to eating healthy and working towards their health goals. So I'm gonna go spend some time with my fam tonight. You guys have an incredible evening, and I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Have a good night, guys.